What's up, football fans? Welcome back to Sports Krunch with Dkrom, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, David Cromwell. And, folks, we just a week from tomorrow, the first NFL training camps will be in session as the Steelers and Minnesota Vikings report to their respective facilities to train for the 2015 NFL season. And it should be an exciting one as usual. And tonight we are continuing our divisional preview series by breaking down the NFC East with a good friend of mine. It's a pleasure to have him on the program. He was my former colleague at FirstStopFantasy.com. He's still there. I'm not. And he's also a sports media major at Grace College in Indiana. You can correct me on that if it looks like he is, so I'm good with that. At Grace College, and he is a beautiful football mind, and it's a pleasure to welcome my man, Andrew Weidman, to the show. What's going on, Andrew?
Not much, man. Just excited to get this podcast going. NFC East. It's probably my favorite division in all of football, so it's been a great one to talk about.
Yeah, it is a very interesting division. Like, if you look back to 2011, every team these past 4 years has won that division. In 2011, it was obviously the Giants who went on to win the Super Bowl. 2012, it was Washington with RG3's unbelievable rookie year. 2013, it was the Eagles and Chip Kelly's debut in the National Football League. And last year was obviously the Cowboys with the resurgence behind the best offensive line in the National Football League. And speaking of the Cowboys, let's begin by talking about the Cowboys. Let me pull up their draft class on the screen right over here. And as you can see, in the first round with the 27th overall pick, they selected a defensive back out of Connecticut named Byron Jones, who tore up the combine and earned the infamous workout warrior label. And there's a lot of debate on, is he just another one of those workout warriors who doesn't pan out in the league, or the Cowboys seem to have very high hope for him, but they see him as more of a safety as a corner, like a ball hawking center fielder, like an Ed Reed type safety. So my question to you about Byron Jones is, first round with the 27th overall pick, they selected a defensive back out of Connecticut named Byron Jones, who tore up the combine. I hear my voice. There's a workout for your label, and there's something weird's going on here. One of those workout warriors who doesn't pan out in the league, I don't know. Very high hope for a safety as a corner, like a ball hawking center fielder, like an Ed Reed type safety. So my question to you about Byron Jones is, first round with the 27th overall pick, they selected a defensive back out of Connecticut named Byron Jones, who tore up the combine. What's going on here?
I have no clue.
And there's a lot of things going on here. One of those workout warriors who doesn't pan out in the league, very high hope for a safety in the corner, like a ball hawking center fielder, like an Ed Reed type safety. So my question to you about Byron Jones is, first round of the 27th overall pick, they selected a defensive back out of Connecticut named Byron Jones, who tore up the combine. What's going on here? And there's a lot of things going on. One of those workout warriors who doesn't pan out in the league, very high hope for a safety in the corner, like a ball hawking center fielder, like an Ed Reed type safety. So my question to you about Byron Jones Oh boy. Uh,
Interesting.
oh boy. I don't know what happened there, but my question about Byron Jones is he a workout warrior to you, or is he more than that?
I think he's going to be a really, really great player. The only problem I have with him is, are they going to play him at corner or are they going to play him at safety? That's kind of throughout the whole training camp or coming into training camp and, throughout the summer workouts, they're not sure where they're going to put him. Do they want to put him at corner and they want to put him at safety? And the thing with the Cowboys is they need help everywhere in that secondary. The secondaries are awful. You have Orlando Scandrick and Brandon Carr at corner, and then you have Barry Church and J.J. Wilcox at safety. That's you're not going to win many games, and obviously that offense is great, with that offensive line and everything, but the secondary is just it's awful. And I do think that Byron Jones is going to be more than just a workout warrior. I actually had a top 20 grade on him this last draft. I thought he was going to go top 20. He's that good. A lot of players, when they perform in the combine, the combine kind of lies a little bit. If you base too much off of a combine, you might come back to bite you. But the combine's there for a reason. It's to give you a taste of these players and what they can do. And we won't know what he can do until training camp. I think training camp's going to make or break this guy. See what he can do. I do think that they're going to line him up at safety because he can make a play on a ball. And like you said, that Ed Reed kind of ball hawking skill. I think that he can do that. So I think lining him up as safety is going to be what they're going to have to do to maximize his potential.
Yes, and you mentioned how awful that Cowboys secondary is, as I do as well. And you mentioned Brandon Carr. They've been trying to release him or take a pay cut. Before we continue talking about the rest of this stellar Cowboys draft class, do you think it's possible that they part ways with Brandon Carr after training camp?
It's going to be hard with that huge contract. He's got a really big contract right now. If they cut him, it's going to take a hit. But, he's ever since they signed him, he has not lived up to, what he can do. It's going to be interesting to see. I think that if they can cut him, they will. But it's just a matter of, can they afford to take that cut? And, the only thing that is, I think they'll keep him just because, they don't have a lot of depth there. Behind Skandrick and Carr, you have, Mo Claiborne, who hasn't lived up to anything. And so, it's a hard decision. I think they might have to keep him. But if they feel comfortable enough, they'll release him without any clue, without, any remorse. They'll just cut him. So, that's what I think. So we'll see.
We shall see indeed. And moving back to the Cowboys draft class, like I said, it was a stellar draft class because, in my opinion, they drafted not one, not two, but three first-round caliber talents. And in the second round, with the 60th overall pick of the draft, they selected one of my personal favorite players in the draft, defensive end, pass rusher from Nebraska, Randy Gregory, and who he was projected as a surefire top 5 pick for most of the draft process until it was revealed that he failed another marijuana test at the combine. And also, he was when he was going to meet with teams during the pre-draft process, he slept in and missed the whole meeting at one point. So definitely some character concerns there. But I think they got a potential home run steal with Randy Gregory. How good do you think Randy Gregory can be, and what can we expect of him in his rookie season?
Oh man, I think he can be phenomenal. It was tough seeing my favorite team, kind of pass on him twice. I really wanted them to take him. It was really hard when they passed on him, but I think he's a great talent. He was a top 10 talent before all this happened. But character concerns, they're going to kill your stock. They're going to kill it tremendously. And because in front of him, he's got DeMarcus Lawrence and I believe Jeremy Mincey. That's not really elite quality right in front of him. So if he has himself a great training camp, he's going to be starting from week 1. I do believe that he's going to be starting from week 1. If the main thing is he's got to prove he can stay out of trouble off the field because, in the NFL, they don't like you smoking dope. So you're getting paid all that kind of money, you just got to stop doing it. Getting back to his athletic ability, I think he's great. He's got a great burst off the edge, and he can make a right tackle or a left tackle's job, very hard on that Sunday. And I think that getting him where they did in the draft is just absolutely amazing.
It could be a big steal, like I said, and we concur there. And but you did mention, yeah, Jeremy Mincey. I know him because he played for the Broncos at the tail end of their 2013 Super Bowl run. He's nothing special, but DeMarcus Lawrence, on the other hand, I think has potential to be a functional rotational contributor.
Mm-hmm.
He showed some promise at the end of last season, especially in the divisional playoff in the wild card playoff victory over the Detroit Lions. And and moving on to that third first round caliber player that the Cowboys picked up, and this is, if you thought Randy Gregory was thievery, this was highway robbery. La'el Collins, an offensive lineman from LSU, was projected to go to the first round until it was reported like days before the draft he was wanted for questioning in a murder investigation, and that sent him completely out of the draft. And the Cowboys just swooped in and offered him a fully guaranteed $1 million undrafted free agent contract to lure him in. And the Cowboys had the best offensive line in football last year and still right now. Tyron Smith, left tackle. Zach Martin at left or right guard. I don't know which one, but he was a rookie stud last year. And Travis Frederick, one of the best young centers in the game. And now add La'el Collins to that. Not freaking fair. And my question is, do you think La'el Collins starts this year? And if so, where? Do they plug him in at one of the guard spots, or do you think they try him out at right tackle?
I think he's going to be slotted right in the left guard slot. He's going to be battling with Ronald Leary for that spot, I believe.
Exactly.
But the main thing is Doug Free. He's got a pretty big contract, and I think that eventually La'el Collins, he's going to bump Doug Free out because Collins will be much cheaper, much younger, and they could even part ways with Tyron Smith. I think that was one of the key things that Jerry Jones got La'el Collins for. Is he sees that his offensive line is one of the best, and his players are going to start getting paid, so he brings in La'el Collins for really cheap, keep him cheap for a couple of years, and still have one of the best offensive lines. And just to see Collins go undrafted like that and lose out on all that money, it's kind of crazy, and you feel bad for him just because he had nothing to do with that at all, like absolutely nothing, and somebody just cost him millions of dollars for that, but. It's what a better place to be than the Cowboys if you want to be an offensive lineman. You may not start immediately just because you got the five best offensive linemen in the NFL, but I think he can push Ronald Leary. I think Leary is kind of the weak link on that offensive line per se because Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, Tyron Smith, they're all great. Doug Free is great, and then Leary, he's just kind of along for the ride for a little bit. I feel like he's probably the weak link on there. And so Collins is going to push him, and if he just has an absolutely amazing training camp, he could be started in there at left guard. But Collins can play anywhere, which that's going to really benefit, especially if one of these guys, does go down to injury, and exactly because he can play anywhere. Travis Frederick goes down, they'll just slide Zach Martin over to center because he played center during his days at Notre Dame, and then slide Collins in there at right guard. So I mean that. It's just crazy because they're all multidimensional and they can do anything, and so it's crazy that they were able to get Collins. Crazy.
Oh God, yes. And you brought up a point. You said that he could potentially replace Tyron Smith, but the Cowboys signed him to a gargantuan contract. Dare I say, last summer. So you really think it's possible that La'el Collins could grow into a left tackle one day and the Cowboys could wind up trading Tyron Smith to clear cap space? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think Collins could honestly play anywhere. This year he's going to be in a learning experience. He's going to be around Tyron Smith and Leary and Doug Free, who are veterans. And then he's also going to have some young experience there with Zach Martin and Travis Frederick. And I can't say enough about Zach Martin. In my opinion, he should have been Offensive Rookie of the Year, but, the big guys don't get any love. So that's frustrating for me, especially being a Notre Dame fan. But I honestly think Collins can play anywhere, and be I think he could be elite as a left or right guard, but I think he could be good as a left or right tackle. I don't think he could develop into an elite tackle, but I think that eventually if Tyron Smith, if they want to trade him, clear up some cap space, or Doug Free, clear up some cap space with him, I think Collins could go in there and he could perform well. He probably wouldn't be a top 5 tackle, but he'd be a top 10, and with the offensive line that he has around him, he's only going to get better.
Most definitely. And speaking of that offensive line, the saying goes, it takes two to tango. And the offensive line did its job, but DeMarco Murray did his job last year, rushing for a leading 1,845 yards in a historic rushing campaign. And but they obviously had tight budget, and they couldn't keep him and Des Bryant. And they, thank God for them, they did sign Des Bryant on time on Wednesday. But they were forced to let DeMarco Murray walk at free agency to the division rival Eagles, who we'll get to later on. But it was a little puzzling to me. Although I did agree with the decision to part ways with Murray because I don't believe it paid an exorbitant sum to a running back. But they didn't get a running back in this draft class, which was loaded with running backs. So that implies to me that they are confident that anybody can make it happen behind this offensive line. And that is possible, but you do need a running back that has proper technique to do so. And if you look at the current running backs on their roster, Joseph Randle, Darren McFadden, who they brought in by a free agency, often injured, by the way, and Lance Dunbar and Ryan Williams, who's barely played in years. So my question is, do you think the Cowboys will regret letting DeMarco Murray walk, or do you think Randall, McFadden, Dunbar, Williams, or whoever they feed the rock to on the ground is capable of solid production behind the offensive line, say like a 1,200 yard season?
A 1,200 yard season. I don't think any one of those running backs on the roster will get 1,200 yards. I think Darren McFadden's going to be the leader on that team in rushing yards, but I don't think he's going to eclipse 1,000. They're going to definitely do a running back by committee this year. I think there's not going to be a clear starter in there. You can't keep Darren McFadden as your starter because you run him 20 snaps a game. By week 4, he's going to get injured somehow. So I think with McFadden and Dunbar and Randall, they're going to be a really heavy running back by committee. Maybe McFadden gets about 50% of the snaps, and then Randall and Dunbar split the other 50. It's just they're really gonna miss DeMarco Murray, I believe, but they're not gonna miss paying him all that money. And like you, I'm a big believer in not paying money. I was I was kind of mad when the Eagles got rid of Sean McCoy, but then they picked up DeMarco Murray, which again that doesn't make sense to me, but we'll get to that later. But I think they're gonna miss him just because yes, that offensive line is great, but you're not going to get another 2,000 yard rusher or near 2,000 yard rusher with Darren McFadden as your lead back. So they're going to look to pass a lot more this season, I believe. I don't think they're going to be able to run as much just because of the quality that they have there, because there's not much quality there. They have quantity, but they don't have quality. And for me, I'm a quality over quantity guy. I'd rather have one good running back and 2 serviceable guys that can get you a couple yards, rather than having 3 guys that aren't really going to do much. And that's what they have with McFadden, Randall, and Dunbar. So I do think they're going to regret not having DeMarco Murray there.
You bring up a lot of good points, but that offensive line blows gaping holes open. And Joseph Randall hit them very hard in his limited snaps last season. And in my personal opinion, though, yes, they might miss Murray to a certain degree, as you suggested, but it was their running game last year that rescued this team. It kept a suspect defense off the field for elongated periods of time, and it further protected Tony Romo from having to drop back all day and risk his fragile back to further injury. So I don't care how much of a drop off McFadden and Randall and Ryan Williams and Dunbar are from DeMarco Murray. Shouldn't they try to run the ball at least like 43 or 45% of the time still?
I think they'll try. The question is, how well it's going to succeed. Just because, I mean, yes, the offensive line's great. They're going to open up some holes. But I do kind of question, they've obviously improved on paper with getting Collins. But is it really going to be that easy to duplicate that success? Because a lot of players are going to be more familiar with their team. They're going to be familiar with their blocking schemes, what they do, and they're going to be taking notes on them this offseason. They're preparing for it in training camp. And, they're going to open up holes, but I don't think it'll be as much. I think they will have to pass a little bit more. I think it might lean towards a 60-40 pass to run. I think they're going to 60% of the time they'll go pass, 40% of the time they'll run. It may become, they run on first down, and then, it's a toss-up second down, and then third down they're passing. Something like that. They ran a lot last year, but I don't think they're going to run as much, but they'll try.
You could be right about that, the first part of your final comment there, but the latter part they most definitely have to in order to take that next step towards getting to another Super Bowl and winning it. And moving to the defensive side of the ball, which is where I think these improvements could determine whether or not they take that next step even more than their running game. As we mentioned, they got Randy Gregory in the draft, and they rolled the dice big time in free agency by signing former Carolina Panthers defensive end Greg Hardy, who exploded in 2013 with 15 sacks he had in 2013? And and there's no denying the talent, but he brings character issues too, as he was arrested for a domestic violence incident involving his girlfriend and guns and threats to her last year. And he spent the vast majority of last year on the commissioner's exempt list, and the Cowboys signed him to a basically prove-it deal, no guaranteed money. And like I mentioned, it's not only Gregory that has his baggage, but Hardy has his baggage too. And Clarence Hill, a top Cowboys beat writer who covers the team for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, said that the risk is that they could be a detriment to locker room chemistry and the culture there. How likely do you think it is that they will damage the atmosphere there, or do they have enough? Do they have enough leadership to keep them under control?
Well, you look at that defense, and is there a leader there? And you look at one guy, and you look at Sean Lee as being the leader of that defense. Granted, he doesn't play a lot just because he can't stay healthy, which you kind of feel bad for the guy because he's so tremendously talented. But they don't have that leader on defense besides Sean Lee. I mean, yeah, you have a lot of veteran guys out there, but they're not respected guys. Orlando Scandrick, Brandon Carr, Morris Claiborne. Yeah, they're veterans, but they're not leaders. And then you look at the offensive side as being an offensive leader. Obviously, you got Tony Romo, you got Des Bryant, and
Jason Witten.
You obviously have all those offensive linemen as leaders. But you look at Des Bryant, and it seems like Jerry Jones loves taking on these players that Des Bryant doesn't have off the field issues, but he's got a huge ego, and you can spot it a mile away. And Greg Hardy, he kind of played with an ego too, and Jerry Jones taking a lot of gambles on these guys with off the field issues. And will it be a locker room threat? I think anytime you mix players like that, that they like getting off the field trouble, and I think it can, especially during the early part of the season. Obviously Randy Gregory on a new team, and we got Greg Hardy is on a 4-game suspension now because it got reduced. Yes. So he won't be with the team for 4 weeks. But when he comes in middle of the season, it could disrupt some stuff just because, you got players that off the field issues. Jeremy Mincy had a couple off the field issues in his days in Jacksonville, but I think that's mostly behind him. But I think it could, there's not really a leader on that defense to, kind of put people in check. You know, depending on how these players feel about Sean Lee, I think he's the only guy that can, be that leader on defense. And you're going to have to look to the offense for that leadership. Obviously, you got guys, like I mentioned, you got Tony Romo, but I think I also forgot about Jason Witten. I mean, he's, him and Tony Romo have been there forever, and I think they're going to retire together. They're going to be Cowboys for life. So, they're going to be the leaders, and they're going to have to step up and, kind of take control of this defense as well and just kind of keep everybody in check.
Yes, and speaking of that Cowboys defense, another name that they're very hopeful about is Tyrone Crawford, a three-technique defensive tackle. And keep in mind, folks, Rod Marinelli is the Cowboys defensive coordinator, and he runs that old Tampa 2 defense. And the most important position in that defense is the three-technique. And they are like super high on Crawford because they thought he played so well last year, and they think he could make that leap to give them that dual threat, that run stuffing, pocket collapsing three technique to make the defense the defense's engine run smoothly. How big of a leap do you think Tyrone Crawford can make for them this year? And if he does, how big will that be for the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think he doesn't have a choice. He's going to have to make that leap. Before we get into that, I was really surprised that the Cowboys didn't go out and try and get Terrence Knighton. They didn't try and go get Vince Wilfork. And, that says to me that they do have a lot of confidence in Crawford. I think he's, he doesn't have a good defense around him, which, you can only develop so much if you don't have a good defense. But the defense has a lot of potential. And, I think he's going to be instrumental in this defense and getting it rolling. I think he will elevate his level just because, seeing him last year, he showed some really good play. He played really well for stretches. So I think he's going to elevate it. He may not be elite. He may not even be great, but I think he can be good. And I think that, he can be that multi-use guy that can, plug up the middle and then, try and rush the quarterback a little bit because, with the Cowboys right now, especially going in, they don't have that pass rusher. They have Randy Gregory, but we don't know how he's going to do yet. And so they need to get pressure from inside the middle too. And even if that's, your defensive tackles are pushing out, making room for your linebackers to come up the middle, like him and Nick Hayden, they got to perform in there. And I think Crawford will take a step. I watched a little bit of him last year, and what I watched, especially when he played the Eagles and when he played the Redskins, he looked good. He didn't look great, but everybody can improve, and he's going to have, now that the coaches noticed how well he's going to play, they're going to work with him extra hard. And I think when they work with you extra hard, that's where you're going to perform. And if he has it, he has it, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. So it's going to be interesting to see how he can perform.
Yeah, the whole defense can be riding on the development of him, as we both suggested. But another interesting development happened. Rolando McClain, who for the first half of last year made a case for NFL Comeback Player of the Year the way he played, especially that interception of Russell Wilson to seal their upset victory in Seattle. But he is apparently, his troubles have relapsed. He failed another drug test this spring and will be suspended the first 4 games. And according to many reports I've read out there, that their patience for Rolando McClain to grow up is wearing thin by the minute. And it screws up their plan at linebacker because they plan to move Sean Lee, who you just mentioned, from the Mike position, the middle linebacker, to the weak side linebacker position, which is the most important, which is the Derek Brooks role in the Rod Marinelli defense. And they thought that would fit Lee perfectly. But now with McClain suspended the first 4 games, are they going to be forced to move Lee back to Mike? Or if they keep Lee at the weak side position, who do you think starts at middle linebacker the first 4 weeks? If not, maybe for most of the season if McClain can't keep his head on straight.
Man, that was tough, him getting suspended. But I think they're not gonna have much of a choice. They're gonna have to move Sean Lee inside. And you look at their other linebackers that they have, obviously Anthony Hitchens, he's got that strong side locked up. And then, you got Sean Lee. Is he going to play the Mike or is he going to play the Will? Then behind him, you got people like, Jasper Brinkley, and you have all these undrafted rookies, Mark Nizacha, Donnie Baggs. and they're going to be hurting for linebacker. Those especially those first 4 games. It's terrible. Like I don't know. Like I wouldn't know what to do. Obviously, Sean Lee is better on the inside. He is. That's where he's been his entire career. That's where he knows how to play. So I think they're not going to have a choice but to move him inside. And then maybe when McClain comes back, maybe move him back outside. It's going to be tough, but what I would honestly do is I would keep him outside and slot Jasper Brinkley into that middle. He's the only linebacker there that has experience before. And, may not have been great experience. He's not really anything to write home about. But he has playing experience. He knows what it's like to play in the NFL. So maybe slot him in the middle, keep Sean Lee outside. That way you don't have to slot him out later when McClain comes back. And, just looking at, not having Gregory and not having Rolando McClain, those first 4 games can be really, really rough for the Cowboys.
Indeed, and you mentioned it's Gregory. Correction, it's not Gregory that's suspended. It's Greg Hardy that
Greg
is
Hardy,
suspended the first 4 games of the season. And for the record, folks, without Rolando McClain and Greg Hardy, looking at the Cowboys' first opponents, Eli Manning and the Giants, who we'll get to next, potentially dangerous passing attack. The Eagles and their former Cowboy DeMarco Murray, they could have a hard time stuffing the run. And week 3, Atlanta, another potential lethal passing attack with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, and the Saints, who could be one of the best running teams in the league this year with Mark Ingram and C.J. Spiller. The Cowboys have their work cut out for them on defense, and those first 4 games can determine where they go the rest of the season. And but before we go to the Giants, one final question about the Cowboys, very quick question. For this core of Cowboys, as in Romo, Witten, Dez Bryant, et al., do you think their best shot to win a Super Bowl was last season, or do you think they have an even better shot this season?
I think the potential is there just because they have improved. I think they can still go out there and win a Super Bowl this year. Obviously, they had a really great chance last year. Maybe if Dez actually caught the ball.
That's a stupid rule.
Oh, it's a terrible rule, but it's a rule. But I think they can still go out there. If they get that running, if that offensive line can truly go out there and make Darren McFadden look like a star, I think that they can obviously get back to the Super Bowl this year. But Sean Lee's got to stay healthy. McClain's got to come back and not screw up anymore. Greg Hardy's got to come back and perform well. They have all these what ifs on that team. I think they had a really great chance last year, and they really surprised me last year with how good they did. I did not expect them to do that great last year. I was really shocked. But I think they do have a great chance. I think they're going to be in contention. This NFC East is getting very competitive now with a lot of the moves that have happened in this offseason. It's going to be they're not going to coast in there again. They're not going to be. They might find themselves in a wild card spot. Honestly, one of these. The Giants, the Redskins, the Eagles. I think every one of those teams has a chance to win the division this year. Even the Redskins, and I'm going to really talk about that later. But I think last year was a really good chance. But I think they can get right back there and contend again.
I believe they can as well, and you bring up an interesting point because the Eagle, either one of those 3 teams are capable of surprising. And let's move on to one of them, and that is the New York Giants. And first, let me get their draft class on the screen. There you have it, and you see in the first round they addressed their offensive line, which has been an issue in recent years, by selecting Eric Flowers, an offensive tackle from the University of Miami. And most of the scouts and experts that I read or spoke to believe that he best projects as a right tackle rather than a left tackle, which he played at BU. And the plan was to play him at right tackle, but until unfortunately Will Beatty, who was the Giants' starting left tackle last year, tore his pectoral muscle in training camp and is going to be out until like November. So And based on those Sky reports I read on Flowers, they compare him to Anthony Davis. And what do you think Anthony Davis, not the NBA star, the former 49ers right tackle, Davis, you think of a road grader, a mauler, a run blocker, but he's not a pass protector. And putting a guy like that at left tackle is scary in the National Football League. So do you think the Giants are being smart by putting him at left tackle? Or do you think that there is another just – I'm not saying as good as Will Beatty, but a guy who can at least be functional at that position to keep Flowers at his more natural right tackle position?
Well, it's interesting because I don't think they really had a choice besides sliding Flowers there, because their only other options are, you put Marshall Newhouse there, who came over from the Bengals. You put maybe you can put John Jerry there, but nobody wants him to play. He's not good at all. And then you have Michael Bamiro, came over from the 49ers. They don't have a lot of options. Maybe Newhouse will fit better over there. I don't know. He's been a right tackle his entire career. He's not going to perform well. Eric Flowers obviously is a great right tackle. He can, like you said, great run blocker, not a good pass blocker. And they don't have a lot of options. You can't put Justin Pugh outside. You can't put Jeff Schwartz outside. They're kind of stuck in a rut right here, and I honestly think it's their only option that they're going to have to go with.
Yeah, but with Flowers switching over from right tackle, who do you think they plug it at right tackle, especially if Pugh and Jeff Schwartz and obviously Weston Richburg can't kick outside?
Well, I think they're going to put Newhouse there. They brought him over from Cincinnati for a reason. Initially, they obviously brought him over for depth. He was going to play. He was going to be their tackle that could slide in. If Flowers or Beatty go out. Obviously, Beatty's out now, only until November. So I think Newhouse is going to be the guy that gets plugged in there. Like I said, you could plug John Jerry in there, but John Jerry's not good. He's a serviceable guard. He can play tackle, but he can't play it well. So I think Marshall Newhouse is going to be the only guy that they can put there.
I believe you're right. And moving on to what they did in the second round of the draft, they traded up to fill a massive hole at safety, especially after saying goodbye to Antrell Roll in free agency. They picked Landon Collins out of Alabama, and I personally was surprised that nobody took Landon Collins in the first round, because I think he, coming from that Alabama system, he has the potential to be a solid contributor in the National Football League. And so were you surprised that he didn't go in round one? And what do you think he brings to the Giants right off the bat?
I was really, really shocked he did not go in the first round. I had him as going as high as 7th to the Chicago Bears. Obviously, they took Kevin White. St. Louis, they could have taken him. They passed him up. Minnesota, they could have taken him. They passed him up. Miami could have taken him. The Eagles could have taken him. So many teams passed up Landon Collins, and I'm honestly not sure why. I like the guy. He's one of the best safeties to come out in the recent years, in my opinion. There hasn't been this high quality of a safety, in a couple drafts, and I think he's gonna start at that strong safety position. He doesn't have a really good running mate. He has Cooper Taylor, not really that good at all as his running mate there at free safety. But I think he's going to bring something that they haven't had, and that's going to be a ball hawk, somebody that can make plays. Obviously, they have DRC, and they have Amu Kamara on the corner, so they can make plays there. But they haven't had a safety to make plays on the ball for a while, and I think that's what Collins is going to do. He's joining a pretty good defense. They're not great, but they're not bad either, and so I think he's going to be good. I was really surprised that he didn't go earlier. Like I said, I had him going as high as 7th. I had a really high grade on him. I would have liked for a lot of teams to taken him, and I was kind of shocked when the Giants did trade up to get him. I didn't think they were going to trade up and get him, but I think he would have been gone a couple picks later. He wouldn't have lasted, but it's a very good pick for them. They traded. Obviously, they didn't give up much. They gave up their second round, and I believe a 5th round. To trade up and get him. But, they won that trade because they're getting a guy that can start from day one. And I think that's what he's going to do. And I think he can be the defensive player of the or defensive rookie of the year, I think he will end up winning defensive rookie of the year.
Um, uh, they're going to definitely need a performance like that from him, especially with what went on with Jason Pierre-Paul in recent weeks, and we'll get to that very shortly. But I was also a big fan of their third-round draft choice, a defensive end out of UCLA, and get your tongues ready, folks, Owamabe Odigizua. From UCLA. And many people thought that he had first round talent, but his injury history slid him down to the third round. And now with Jason Pierre Paul in limbo, dare I say, do you think how much of an expanded role do you think he is going to have his rookie year, especially in nickel pass rush situations?
I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that name. I'm just going to call him Double O from now on. But Double O and JPP, that's a really good running mate right there. But he's going to be behind Jason Pierre-Paul, and what a better guy to learn from. Obviously, Pierre-Paul is one of the best defensive ends in the NFL, top 10. But Double O, he's going to be behind Jason Pierre-Paul. He's going to have Cullen Jenkins, who's another really solid veteran that he can learn from, and he's going to get some playing time. He's not going to just sit on the bench behind these guys and learn. He's going to learn, and he's also going to play. Cullen Jenkins isn't a pass rusher. Let's just, he's an undersized defensive tackle that plays defensive end. So I think Odigizua can, go in that left defensive end spot, and having him and Jason Pierre-Paul, rushing at the same time, I think that can be very deadly on third downs to have that dynamic of a pass duo. And I think that's what his role is going to be. He's going to be a rotational guy that goes in on third downs and gets to the quarterback and 5, 6, 7 sacks. That's very doable for him this year, I think, because that's going to be his role, and eventually he's going to develop into a very solid defensive end.
Especially if health cooperates, I believe he can. And speaking of health, news that shook the football world for the July weekend was Jason Pierre-Paul damaging his hand in a fireworks incident in which he lost his index finger and damaged his thumb as well. So that's why the Giants decided to a long-term deal at the franchise tag deadline on Wednesday. And he is going to have to learn how to use his hand differently. He's got to learn how to adjust, how to get used to a new quality of life, being having 4 fingers on one hand, and that is a subtle but could be huge difference when you're playing a contact sport like football. So my question is, and I know you don't have the most insider information out there, Andrew, but you keep track of it. But based on what you've read or heard, when do you expect, or the Giants expect, Jason Pierre-Paul to be back on the football field this season?
I'm not really sure how long it's going to take for him to fully recover. From, I can't even imagine, blowing off my index finger with a firework. Obviously on his part that was very not really the smartest decision at all. But I think before the preseason gets here, or maybe just into the preseason, we could see him back on there. I've seen some reports where saying, week 2 of the preseason he could be back. I've seen week 1. I've seen towards the end of the training camp. But my question is, this guy, does he really need to go into and play in the preseason? Obviously he knows how to play, but like you said, he's going to have to make a pretty big adjustment, only playing with 4 fingers. And, you might not think playing without a finger is going to be that much for what he does. Obviously, he just rushes the passer. But, not having that finger can kind of throw you off a little bit because you're moving your fingers, you're moving your hands constantly, and your grip is going to be different when you're gripping onto an offensive lineman. And it's going to be interesting. I do think there's not going to be a setback. He's going to be out there week 1. There's no question about that. It's just they got to make a decision. Do you want him to come back and play in the preseason, or do you want to give Owambe Odigizua some playing time at his spot to kind of develop more? And I think from a personnel decision, that's what I would do. kind of let Odizua, kind of get in there, get up some more, just kind of get more, I don't know, like accustomed to playing in the NFL, get in some experience, because obviously Jason Pierre-Paul doesn't need that, but, still work with him, make him come to practices, make him do all this stuff, but come game time, throw Odizua in there, let him play. That's what, personally, I would do, but I don't think there's going to be a question about Jason Pierre-Paul coming back in week 1.
I believe that's what I heard as well, and I definitely agree about giving O'Diggy, as they call him, more reps in the preseason to get him ready, and let JPP rest that hand. But it's interesting because Jason Pierre-Paul was playing in a contract year last year, obviously, and he exploded in the latter half of the season. And a lot of people say, oh, the old JPP is back, but some doubters say, oh, he was playing against subpar offensive lines and that. But here's my question is this. The New York Giants were the 29th ranked total defense in the NFL last year. They were bloody awful. And if Jason Pierre-Paul does not harness that performance that he gave towards the latter half of last season, do you think, given what the Giants have, the question marks behind him at linebacker and in secondary, do you think that they risk only regressing from that ranking?
They were terrible last year. They were absolutely awful. They looked really good on paper, honestly. They really did, but they were just terrible. And I think one thing is if Jason Pierre-Paul doesn't play well next year, I think he's going to be gone. Just because, obviously, they don't have much behind him, but why not start anew? Maybe O'Diggy, maybe he shows some signs of playing better. Maybe they roll with him. Obviously, he's going to be millions cheaper. He's going to be much younger. And, obviously there's not a lot on that Giants defense. They need a huge overhaul and, time to rebuild on that defense if it doesn't pan out. Obviously, I don't think they're going to be terrible. I don't think they're going to be 29th in total defense again. Up front, they're not terrible with Cullen Jenkins, Jonathan Hankins, and Jason Pierre-Paul, obviously. I think the biggest question are those linebackers, because you have John Beeson, but you have your other starters are J.T. Thomas and Devin Kennard. That's not gonna do good for you. The biggest guy that I look at is Mark Herzlich. Obviously, many know his story coming out of college and everything. And I think he can perform. I think he can be really good. But, if that defense does regress, I think Jason Pierre-Paul will be gone. There's no question about it. If they're not going to get any better and they need a lot of help, then he's going to be gone. They're not going to pay him the money. They'll go out and they'll get some younger talent.
I completely agree. And that defense was horrible last year, but a lot of it, I believe, was injuries, as both Amukamara and Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie went down with season-ending injuries, and John Beeson just can't stay healthy. So health everywhere is paramount for a defensive improvement. But nonetheless, bringing back Steve Spagnuolo to be their defensive coordinator, and he was the defensive mastermind that game planned against Tom Brady in the 2007 Patriots in Super Bowl 42, and having him back in the fold, I think, will help quite a bit. And moving to the offensive side of the ball, which is clearly the strength of this team, you got a three-headed beast at running back with Rashad Jennings, who looked very good last year until one of his inevitable injuries sidelined him for a while. You got Andre Williams, who flashed, especially in short yardage goal line situations. And you bring in the unsung hero of Super Bowl 49, Shane Vereen. Shane Vereen caught 11 passes in Super Bowl 49 and was a key run-after-catch target for Tom Brady and the Patriots. And now he's with the Giants, giving Eli another weapon. And it's a very interesting backfield situation. And they're saying that Jennings is going to be a lead dog, but Williams could take over in the red zone and Vereen coming in on third down. So how do you think the snaps and touches among those three will be divided up throughout the course of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I would kill to have that backfield. Obviously, they don't have the best backfield in the NFC East. But looking at that, I don't think that Andre Williams is going to get much at all. I think the guy behind him, Orleans Darkwa, is going to get a lot more. Obviously, Darkwa comes over from Miami, and I liked him in Miami. He was obviously he didn't have many stats. He didn't do much, but I got to see him in training camp, and he looks really good. And he's exactly what Andre Williams is. He's going to be that goal line back that can punch you in. But I think Rashad Jennings is going to be that lead back. He's going to get I would say upwards of 65% of the carries. Shane Vereen doesn't run the ball that much. He's a running back, but he's not a running back at the same time because he doesn't run. He can, but he doesn't. So I don't think Vereen's going to get many touches at all. I think he could see upwards of 5, maybe 6 rushes, but of course he can also get 10, 11 receptions as well. And so I think that's going to be his biggest role. He won't get many carries at all. I think Jennings is going to get probably 60, 65, 70% of the carries. And then, you have Darkwood and, Williams kind of splitting the load there on the rest of those carries. They do have, it's obviously a really deep running back core, but I don't think it's going to be split up as many people think just because Vereen doesn't run the ball. Even when he can, he's not really great at running the ball. And so I think Jennings is going to get a lot more. But if Jennings can stay healthy, that's going to be another key. And I think that's why it's good to have Williams and Darkwood behind you. So I never know what Tom Coughlin's going to do. I mean, I really don't. But I think Jennings is going to get the bulk load of the carries. And I think Vereen's obviously going to go in there in third downs. He's a good pass protector as well. And so he can pass protect and catch the ball. And then Williams and Darkwood kind of split the rest of those loads. I don't think it's going to be much, but I think Jennings is going to probably get a bulk load of the carries. I wouldn't draft him on a fantasy team just because he's not going to be your guy to get a lot of the carries, but he's going to get the most.
I completely see that scenario unfolding, Andrew. But as you mentioned, Shane Vereen, his role being in the passing game, that adds yet another weapon to what could be a freakish passing attack for the New York Giants. Keep in mind, this is the second year that they're in offensive coordinator Ben McAdoo's system, and Ben McAdoo was Aaron Rodgers' quarterbacks coach in Green Bay before he came to the Giants. And Eli Manning, if you look, his stats don't lie, he thrived in his first year of the system by throwing over 30 touchdown passes and having his 27 interceptions from 2013 down to 14 interceptions last season. And Eli is in arguably the final contract year of his career, his chance for a final payday, arguably. And with the addition of Vereen to Odell Beckham Jr., who, if you're a football fan and don't know who he is, you're drunk, not lying. The 2014 Rookie of the Year, Odell Beckham Jr. And Victor Cruz, although he might not, I'm concerned he might not be full strength, especially the start season coming off that torn patellar tendon injury. And Ruben Randall, who's no slouch either, and Larry Donnell, who also pitched in a couple great games. You have a lot of weapons to play with on this offense in the second year of a rhythm West Coast passing system that Eli showed he could thrive in. So in this being, like I said, arguably his final big contract year of his career, do you think Eli can match or exceed his performance from 2014?
Oh, I definitely think he'll exceed it. I hate to be everybody is, on this, Odell Beckham Jr. hype train. I'm one of the minority that isn't. I don't think he's going to have a good year, but I don't think he's going to be able to repeat what he had last year. Not so much due to his, ability. Obviously, he's great. I think he was overshadowed by one catch. It was a great catch, obviously, but I think that kind of hyped him. But, I mean, obviously, you're bringing Victor Cruz back. Victor Cruz is a number 1 wide receiver, so you have 2 number 1 wide receivers going at it. Obviously, you have Ruben Randall, who can still perform. And one guy that I also look at that wasn't mentioned was Dwayne Harris. Comes over from the Cowboys. And Harris showed a lot with Tony Romo. He can stretch the field. He's fantastic at it. He's burned secondaries. That's his specialty. And I think, especially with that, obviously you have Harris, stretching the field. Randall can stretch the field as well. Then you hit him in the middle with Beckham and Cruz and Larry Donnell, like you mentioned. I think there's no doubt in my mind that Eli Manning's going to exceed his numbers last year, especially because I think they're going to have to, just because of that defense. They're going to be giving up a lot of points. They're going to be playing a lot of catch-up. They're going to have to score, and they're going to have to score fast. And there's no question that he's going to exceed it, especially with Victor Cruz coming back. It's going to be interesting to see who gets the most receptions and most yards and most touchdowns, because I don't think it's going to be Odell Beckham Jr.
Oh, interesting. But keep in mind, Victor Cruz is coming off a torn patellar tendon, which most medical experts say is an even harder knee injury to come back from than a torn ACL. So you seem to be very confident that Victor Cruz is going to buck a trend there. What makes you so confident that he's going to exceed my personal expectations of him and come back from that injury in a way that I personally don't expect?
It's just one of those things. I had a feeling when Adrian Peterson went down with his torn ACL. I had a feeling that, when that first happened, I'm like, oh, he's really gonna bounce back. He's a star. Obviously, he did. Obviously, a torn patellar tendon it's not a light injury at all. It's a huge injury. Like you said, it's harder to come back from an ACL in some cases. But I don't think it's more so because Victor Cruz is going to be good, or he's going to be great. I just don't think Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be that good again. I think he's way overhyped. People are, especially in fantasy football, people are taking Odell Beckham Jr. in the first round and the second round, and I think that's absolutely insane. I don't think the guy's going to do that well. I think he could see 1,000 yards. I think he could see 8 touchdowns, but I think that's going to be his top. I think that's going to be his ceiling, and his floor could go anywhere from 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. It's going to be in between there just because, like you said, Eli Manning has a lot of weapons now with Victor Cruz coming back. He's got Ruben Randle. He's got Dwayne Harris. He's got Shane Vereen. And, he's still got Rashad Jennings who can catch out of the backfield as well. Odell Beckham Jr. could very well lead this team again in receptions and touchdowns and catches, but I don't think he's going to do it as well as he did last year. I think it's going to be very close with Victor Cruz, and I think Ruben Randle can be right behind him. And, and we saw Larry Donnell. Larry Donnell was interesting. He had 3 or 4 just really great weeks, and then he tapered off, and then as he tapered off, that was when Odell Beckham Jr. came from his injury, and he started to perform, and he was the only one performing. It was just Odell Beckham Jr. And that's not going to be able to happen this year. He's not going to be able to Eli Manning's just not going to be able to throw the ball to Odell Beckham Jr. He's going to have to spread the ball around to Victor Cruz and Ruben Randle, and that's why I don't think Odell Beckham Jr. is going to repeat his performance from last year.
You definitely bring up the good point. Like I said, it's Ben McAdoo's system who came over from Green Bay, and given how they spread the ball out in Green Bay, Eli Manning's going to do the same exact thing. So I definitely see where you're coming from there. But before we move on to the Eagles, there's one last question about the Giants. In his end-of-the-season presser, Giants owner John Mara was asked the question, is 2015 a win-or-else campaign? And he responded by saying that's not entirely inaccurate, and which means that Tom Coughlin, yes, I believe he's a Hall of Fame coach, but he's 69 years old, and the Giants since 2008 have only been to the playoffs once, albeit that was a Super Bowl, but still they've missed the playoffs for the remaining years out of that time frame, and so what would you say the odds are this is Tom Coughlin's final season with the New York Giants? And also, do you think general manager Jerry Reese could be on the chopping block too?
It depends, because I don't think Tom Coughlin is going to be fired. I really strongly don't think that they're going to fire Tom Coughlin. The only way that Tom Coughlin leaves this team is if he leaves on his own and retires. I think this is going to be, if this is the last year for Tom Coughlin, it's going to be his last for his entire career. He's going to go out and retire. He's not going to be a head coach anymore. I think this is going to be his last team. As you mentioned, he's 69 years old. You know, he's had a very fantastic career, Hall of Fame career, really good coach. He was the one that kind of started that Jacksonville Jaguars, kind of made them, known to the league. Obviously, they're not now, but I don't think that they're going to be able to fire Tom Coughlin just because, you look at his resume. He brought 2 Super Bowl titles to the New York Giants. That's not something to take lightly. That's something that, a lot of coaches in the last 10 years haven't done. Obviously, Bill Belichick aside, but he cheats. So, but I don't think they're going to be able to fire him. I really, really don't. I think he's going to retire. As for general manager Jerry Reese, if they do fail this year, I think he will be gone. Just because, obviously, head coaches mean a lot to a team. Obviously, because the players are interacting with the head coach every day. General managers, yeah, you mean a lot to the team, but you don't at the same time because you're not there with the players. You're not interacting with the players that much. And I think that Jerry Reese could very well be fired. Say the Giants finish at like 7-9 and they miss the playoffs, he could be gone. It's hard to see Tom Coughlin ever getting fired. I feel like Tom Coughlin's been on the hot seat, every year since hasn't been to the Super Bowl. I feel like he's been on the hot seat every year, but nothing ever happens. So I don't think that Tom Coughlin will leave unless he decides to himself.
That very well could be the case, especially given Coughlin's age, and if he does leave, it might be retirement. Given as you watch the NFL Network series of Football Life, they had a special on him. He is a big family man, and I think he wants to spend his golden years with the grandchildren. So moving along to one of your favorite teams, the Philadelphia Eagles, who in my opinion had the most intriguing offseason of any team not named the San Francisco 49ers. And as we pull up their draft class on the screen right here, there it is. And they did part ways with Jeremy Maclin in free agency, given the amount of money Chip Kelly wanted to spend addressing the defense. But they found his replacement, or dare I say clone, in the first round in picking Nelson Aguilar out of USC. And not only is Nelson Aguilar a sharp route runner, he has something that Maclin did not have, which is like return game chops. Mm-hmm. And he could be a potential upgrade over Maclin long term. But the big question is, in what could be a boomer bust season for the Eagles, what do you expect from Nelson Aguilar this season? Will he start opposite Jordan Matthews? And dare I say, does he have a chance to lead the team in receptions and receiving yardage?
I think Jordan Matthews will be the leader in receptions and receiving yards, but Aguilar is going to be right behind him. You look at the rest of that wide receiving core. It's you have Matthews, who's going to be in the slot. That's where he is most comfortable. That's where he can get the most production. He's going to be in the slot, no doubt about that. Aguilar is going to be on the outside, one of the outside spots, and then on the other outside spot, it's either Riley Cooper, who he can play in the red zone. He can get you some touchdowns, but that's about it. Or you're going to go with Miles Austin, who I don't know why he was brought over in the first place. He's not good, and plus he's injured all the time. And then you have Josh Huff, who, he stretches the field, but he just can't hold on to the ball. There were so many fumbles last year when he was doing the return game, and a couple when he was as a receiver. And Aguilar, he's going to be great. I didn't like the pick at first, but because I really wanted one of those top 3 receivers, and we missed out. Obviously, I wanted Amari Cooper or Devontae Parker or Kevin White. I wanted one of them really bad. And then I thought we were going to go secondary. I really thought the Eagles were going to go secondary with that number 20 pick. And when they picked Aguilar, I wasn't too thrilled about it. But I have seen Aguilar play. Being a Notre Dame fan, I'm very accustomed to the University of Southern California. Very accustomed to them. Can't stand them at all. Almost as much as my hatred for the University of Michigan. But Aguilar's, he's a fantastic player. He can do it all. Like you said, he's He is a Jeremy Maclin clone. They're same size. You know, they play the same. They play the same, and he's going to be obviously much cheaper. You know, Jeremy Maclin signed a huge contract with the Kansas City Chiefs, and you know, Chip Kelly does a lot of things to me that don't make sense, but I think drafting Aguilar makes a lot of sense now. Obviously, I didn't like it at first, but and he'll have plenty of opportunities to perform with that wide receiver core that's there. They're young, and you know he's going to be one of the best options there, opposite of Jordan Matthews. The one thing that we'll take away from him is the Eagles do, not even arguably, they do have the best tight end duo in the NFL with Zach Ertz and Brent Selleck.
Whoa!
You know, they do have the best tight end duo. Brent Selleck, I think, is so tremendously underrated. He's so underrated. He's incredibly good. And, you know, obviously, he's came into more as, you know, being the pass blocker, run blocker in that role now, with Zach Ertz being the main receiver. But Selleck, he can still catch the ball. And, you know, I think Zach Ertz will be the number one target on that offense. And then, you know, you got Jordan Matthews and Aguilar will be right there. And, you know, Brent Selleck, he's still a huge guy in the red zone you can throw to. And Sam Bradford's going to love that, you know, if he's even on the field. But, you know, like, it's going to be tough for Aguilar to be able to lead this team. But I do think he will have a great season. I just don't think he's going to be the top guy there.
That is perfectly reasonable expectations. Those are for Aguilar. And in the second round, the Eagles addressed that secondary that you mentioned, which has been one of the worst units in the National Football League these past 2 years, ranking, I believe, 31st and 32nd in pass defense these past couple years. And that's why you gave all those bucks to Byron Maxwell, bringing him over to be your shutdown cornerback, as he showed that promise opposite Richard Sherman in Seattle. But you drafted a versatile defensive back in the second round in Utah's Eric Rowe, who is a corner safety hybrid. And the question I have about Rowe is, do you think he's better at safety or better at corner? And if we are to see him a lot or regularly on the field, if at all this year, which of those positions do you think it'll be?
It's kind of funny because it's the same thing as Byron Jones,
Exactly.
the situation in the Cowboys, because, you know, Rowe obviously can play either way, and the Eagles do have some concerns as well at safety. Obviously, they have Malcolm Jenkins there. He's going to be fine. But they also have Earl Wolf, who just so many flashbacks of him last year and the year before, just getting burnt constantly. But also, to determine where Eric Rowe's going to play, they're going to have to determine where Walter Thurman can play as well. Because Thurman is a guy that can play safety and corner as well. So, I mean, they have those two guys that are just kind of, you know, they're floaters. You know, where are they going to play? Where's one going to work the best? I do think Rowe will end up being a corner. I think that's where he's going to be most suited. Whereas I had Jones going to safety. But I think, you know, Eric Rowe is going to go in at corner, and behind him is going to be Nolan Carroll, and obviously you have Brandon Boykin, who's the best slot corner in the NFL. So I think Walter Thurman is going to – I know you're going to refute that. I think Eric Rowe will start off as a corner opposite of Byron Maxwell. And if that doesn't work out, put him at safety, take Earl Wolf out, plug Walter Thurman in there at corner. You know, that's one thing that Chip Kelly did well this offseason is strengthen that secondary, because it was awful with Bradley Fletcher there. He was just terrible. I don't even know where. I think he went to the Patriots. Yeah. I do believe that's where he went. But, you know, they can have him. He was terrible. But so I think Rowe is going to be there at that cornerback spot opposite of Byron Maxwell.
Very well could be, given that they spent a second-round pick on him, and you don't draft people in the second round to sit on the bench for 2 years. So that is clearly the expectation. In the third round, the Eagles added to their linebacking core by picking Jordan Hicks out of Texas. And they say that he will be an inside linebacker in the Eagles' 3-4 defense. And you already have three inside linebackers of note on the roster. Kiko Alonso, who you acquired in that trade, which we'll discuss in a minute. And the Eagles also have Michael Kendricks, who's one of the most underrated players in the National Football League, in my opinion, and D'Amico Ryans, a key leader and veteran who has a solid football IQ, but is coming off an Achilles tear and is past his prime, in my opinions. And my question is, do you think the selection of Hicks means that both Ryans and or Kendricks, with what I've been hearing, could be the next on the shipping block, as I like to call it?
I do think that's what's going to happen. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of D'Amico Ryans. He's probably my favorite player on that team. I think Connor Barwin might actually be my favorite, but I think D'Amico Ryans is going to be the guy to go, and Jordan Hicks kind of takes that on. Obviously, we're going to talk about Kiko Alonso later, but I think drafting Jordan Hicks, rather, was very good, just because obviously D'Amico Ryans does have injury issues. Kiko Alonso obviously has injury issues, so Hicks, I think, is a capable starter. Maybe not yet, but I think with some work he can be there. And I think, obviously, they could slot him outside there as well. Obviously, Connor Barwin's a fantastic player. Brandon Graham, he's finally starting after Trent Cole left town, which makes me very angry. But Brandon Graham is getting a shot there now. And so Jordan Hicks, I think, will have a chance to play outside as well. It's going to be interesting to see, what Chip Kelly does. Obviously, Chip Kelly doesn't know much about defense. We'll see what Billy Davis does with Jordan Hicks. It's going to be interesting to see what he does. But I think, for now, slotting him inside is going to be the best.
You could be very well correct about that. And before we go into one other quick question about the Eagles draft, I refute your claim about Brandon Boykin being the best slot corner in the game. He is good, but I say my man Chris Harris Jr. of the Broncos is the best slot corner in the game. But yes, he plays more on the boundary now, but when you move him into slot, he's better than anybody, in my opinion. So, but if you wanted to say Boykin is the best slot corner in the game who plays most of his snaps in the slot, then you got a case, to be fair. But and the Eagles, based on what they said on NFL Insiders on ESPN a couple days ago, they're very excited about some of their other rookie corners as well. Like in the 6th round, they got Ja'Cory Shepherd, 5'11" corner out of Kansas, and in the 6th round, you got Randall Evans, a 6-foot corner out of Kansas State. And which one of those two guys do you think has an opportunity to make some noise this season, if not both?
I do think Ja'Cory Shepherd probably has the better chance. He's more accustomed to playing on the left side, which is where Nolan Carroll is at. And, Nolan Carroll isn't that great. Honestly, his days in Miami, he played decent, but, with the cornerback situation down in Miami, they're not that great opposite of Brent Grimes, and he never really performed. And, he obviously comes here, and I don't think he's going to be that great here, so I think Shepherd might have an opportunity to come in there and kind of take up that backup spot behind Eric Rowe or Walter Thurman, whatever happens there. But I think Shepherd will have the better chance. I liked the pick of Randall Evans, but I don't think he's going to be much more than a camp guy. Maybe he makes it as the 5th or 6th cornerback, maybe. It's very debatable if they carry 6. But I think Ja'Cory Shepherd, I like him. Saw some of his tape in college. He looked very well. He looked very good. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think Shepherd probably has the better chance.
That would be an interesting thing to watch for the Eagles in training camp as they fortify that much-needed secondary depth. And we only have about a half hour or so left, so we're going to have to move along a little quicker, just to let you know, Andrew. Sorry about that, but I know we're both have other commitments after this. And Chip Kelly shook, like I suggested, he shook the football world by storm this offseason. Once he got essentially the GM duties handed to him, he made 2 blockbuster trades. One of them sending Nick Foles, who was a rock star in 2013, but who leveled off significantly in 2014, to the St. Louis Rams for Sam Bradford, who is at times the former #1 pick from Oklahoma in 2010, has flashed ability to be a top 10 quarterback in this league, but injuries have just kept robbing him from doing it, and has torn his ACL in back-to-back season, which is even more scary, in my opinion. And trading LaShawn McCoy, who was the NFL League rushing champion in 2013 and still got 1,300 yards in 2014, to the Buffalo Bills for Kiko Alonso, who was outstanding in 2013. He had the Defensive Rookie of the Year campaign, arguably, that year, but he missed all last year, he's coming off an ACL tear. So, and you didn't seem to be thrilled with either of those trades. But if you had to pick one, which move do you think can be the best choice for the Eagles in the long run?
I think it's probably going to have to be the Kiko Alonso and LaShawn McCoy trade, just because, they did get DeMarco Murray there. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of trading Nick Foles at all. I absolutely hated it. I still don't like it to this day. Sam Bradford, obviously he has tremendous potential. He can be good, but he's not going to stay healthy. It's not a matter of, if he gets hurt. It's a matter of when at this point in his career. And just a lot of the offseason moves that Chip Kelly made, bringing a lot of these injured players over. I don't like it that Alonso was brought over. I think I would have probably tried to trade for another player. But obviously Alonso, he's great. Like you said, 2013 had a tremendous campaign. But last year, that ACL injury, I don't particularly like either one of those trades, but I do think that in the long run, getting Kiko Alonso will be better, just because, a running back's life in the NFL isn't long, and, LaShawn McCoy, with the amount of yardage that he has and the amount that he's run, he doesn't have much left, maybe a couple years, but Alonso's a guy that can play there for another 10 years. So I think in the long run, if Alonso can stay healthy, it's a great trade. I don't like it right now just because he's injured, but it can be a really great trade.
I have a feeling the Eagles will come out the winners of that trade. I really do, because I honestly think Kiko Alonso can bounce back from the ACL injury given his young age, and also I've heard the glowing reports coming out of OTAs, and I think he could be a very solid player, especially since he played for Chip Kelly at Oregon. So, and that's why I think he'll thrive with the Eagles. So, but when you look at this Eagles defense, man, yes, the secondary was pitiful these past couple years, but when you look at that front, that is one of the most underrated units in the National Football League. You mentioned Connor Barwin. He had an amazing season, double-digit sacks last year. He finally showing that potential he showed when he was with the Texans playing under Wade Phillips' system. And Brandon Graham on the other end, pass rushing outside linebacker, finally started to come into his zone and show why the Eagles spent a first-round pick on him in 2010. And you got Fletcher Cox, who is an emerging superstar at the 5 technique defensive end, one of my personal favorite players last year. I watched him. He was everywhere, like not just stopping the run, but getting collapsing the pocket as well. And you got like those linebackers we just mentioned with Kiko, who I think could be very tremendous, and Michael Kendricks, who's another one of my most underrated players in the National Football League. That is an underrated front. And given the upgrades you made to the secondary with obviously getting Byron Maxwell and those promising rookies like Eric Rowe and Ja'Cory Shepard and Malcolm Jenkins, who is a very underrated player himself, how much will the Eagles defense improve this season statistically? Or what do you expect? Or how much do you personally expect the Eagles to improve from a statistical point of view?
Get ready for this. The Eagles will be a top 10 defense this year. Top 10. You look at that front seven: Fletcher Cox, Benny Logan, Cedric Thornton, Connor Barwin, Michael Kendricks, Kiko Alonso, Brandon Graham. That's a really fantastic front seven and very, very underrated. Benny Logan is one of the best nose tackles in the NFL, but he doesn't get a lot of credit. A lot of nose tackles don't get credit because of the job they do. No one really appreciates what a nose tackle does, but he's fantastic. Cedric Thornton, he's really good as a 3-4, but they will be top 10 only if Kiko Alonso stays healthy. if Alonso can't stay healthy, I think D'Amico Ryans and Jordan Hicks, they're good, but then I think they slide maybe top 15. But they have great potential to be a really fantastic defense, especially turning the ball over. Eric Rowe, he seems like a magnet. He can go to the ball wherever it's at. They're going to get sacks. They're going to force fumbles. They're going to be a really good defense this year, and I do have to commend Chip Kelly for turning around this defense. Obviously, they haven't played a game yet, so I can't really commend them yet. If they completely fail, then maybe I'll get mad. But at this point, I think they're going to be a really fantastic top 10 defense. Some stuff may change. Obviously going into the training camp in the preseason, some stuff may change where I change my views on them, but they will be a really fantastic defense this year, which is something that the Eagles haven't had since the days of Brian Dawkins and Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown, and just that fantastic defense that they have with Jeremiah Trotter and all, just that fantastic defense. This is the best defense since those days, and it's going to be interesting to see how well they play off of paper.
Sure looks that way on paper, and if the Eagles do get a top 10 defense, I will fast forward back to this moment when you called it, Andrew. So I'm going to write it down, and because I made plenty of bold predictions myself this season, and you just made another one there, and add it to the list. And the Eagles, like I said, they've had their chipping block, as I suggested, with that's a wordplay on Chip Kelly, but yes, you trade LaShawn McCoy, despite his rushing for over 1,300 yards in 2 consecutive seasons. You trade away Nick Foles, which for often injured Sam Bradford. And you also did a little bit of a risk here by letting go of Evan Mathis. Yes, he was hurt last year. And yes, he's 33 years old, but he was still the number 2 rated guard by ProFootballFocus.com last year. And Pro Football Focus, folks, I'm not saying it's the Bible, but I just really respect their analysis and stat crunching, and film crunching. So that leaves it whole. And they also let Todd Herremans, who was a veteran stable on the Colts, on the Eagles offensive line for a long time, go to the Colts. So those 2 guard spots are interesting right now, and given how Chip Kelly wants to run the ball, and we'll get to the running game in a minute, but who is going to start a guard for the Eagles this year? Because without solid interior offensive line play, I think that running game could go south.
Left guard is going to be Alan Barber. He's got that basically nearly locked up. Playing last year, he's got it locked up at left guard, and I think he's going to do well. Obviously, he's going to be a bit of a drop off from Todd Herremans, but that right guard spot, there's 3 guys going for that spot. You got Andrew Gardner, you got Matt Tobin, and you got David Molk, all going for that spot. We saw Molk and Tobin last year. I think Tobin has a little bit of the advantage right now, but honestly, either one of those guys is going to go in there, but it's not nearly going to be what Evan Mathis was. He was the best guard in the NFL. He still is, no matter where. He's going to go somewhere. It's just a matter of when. I don't know what team's going to sign him. I don't know when he's going to sign. But he's going to go somewhere and make a team better. But, either one of those 3 guys, Molt, Tobin, Gardner, they're going to be serviceable at best. None of them are going to be good. It's going to be an area that the Eagles are going to have to address next year. Maybe they address it this year, but it's not looking good for the right guard. It's funny because Tyron Smith said about how the Cowboys still have the best offensive line in the NFL. Jason Peters tweeted at him and said that the Eagles still have the best offensive line in football. And while I love to hear that, it's not true, just because that right guard spot is just it's not good at all. And neither one of those guys are going to come in there and be good. So I don't really think it's going to matter who's there, but they're going to have to do something.
Yeah. Do you think the Eagles are going to regret letting Evan Mathis go?
Talent-wise, yes, but money-wise, I don't think so. Just because Mathis is wanting a large lump sum of money, and he is 33 years old. But while he is 33 years old, he didn't really start playing until he was about 28. Obviously, I believe he was drafted by the Bengals, and then he went to Miami for a year, and he really didn't do much there, and he didn't really find a home and actually start actually playing until he came to Philadelphia 5 or 6 years ago, when he was about 27. So I mean, you got to imagine he's probably in a 28-year-old's body right now at being 33. Obviously, he ages more, obviously, but he's still a young old guy. And I think letting him go, I think Chip Kelly has it in his mind that you can't pay a player a lot of money, but he was one guy that I would have paid the money just because I think he's crucial for this team. I would have paid him the money. Do I think they'll regret it? I think they'll probably regret it as much as the Cowboys will let DeMarco Murray go. So it's they'll regret it a little bit, but I think they'll be fine with Gardner, Molk, and Tobin, or whichever one of them starts. I don't know. I think they'll be fine. It won't be like right guard is probably, I wouldn't say it's the least important position there, but you're not protecting the blind side, and you're sealing off the running game up the middle. But I really didn't like that they let Mathis go. So will they regret it? I hope so.
Well, money was obviously one of the reasons they let Evan Mathis go, but it could be the reason that they have confidence in their backfield. You obviously spent all that money on bringing DeMarco Murray over from the division rival Cowboys, the 2014 league rushing champion, but you also added Ryan Matthews from the Chargers, who, when healthy, has shown a lot of potential. Like in 2011 and 2013, he had pretty solid seasons for the Chargers. And when word has it, the Eagles really love him too. So you could Darren Sproles doesn't factor into this equation necessarily because he's more of like Shane Vereen is his type of back. He's more of a receiving back, but he can run at times. But between Murray and Ryan Matthews, who I believe are going to be the focal points of the Eagles offense this season, how much do you think Matthews will eat into DeMarco Murray's load?
This is another player that I wasn't a fan of bringing over. I liked Ryan Matthews when he played in San Diego. I liked him as a person. I liked him as a player. But from a standpoint, it's not a good signing just because this guy can't stay out of the medical center. You know, he can't do it. He can't stay out of the medical center. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. I don't like it at all. He's injured. Obviously he can run there. But I do want to say something about Darren Sproles. He's more than a Shane Vereen guy to me, just because he vultured away 6 touchdowns last year from LaShawn McCoy. McCoy only scored 5, and that really hurt him. That really hurt his chances. And Darren Sproles stole 6 touchdowns from McCoy that should have been his, and I didn't understand why Darren Sproles got put in there on, 3rd and goal from the 3 when he's not even that huge of a back, but he still stole them. So I think they will be a 3-headed back there. I think Darren Sproles will get a lot of looks. But just for Ryan Matthews, I don't know what he's going to do. I think he's going to get injured some point during the season just because that's what he does. That's his specialty, is getting injured. So I don't like the signing, and I don't think he's going to eat into a lot of DeMarco Murray's carries, but it's going to be interesting to see what he does.
Yeah, but keep in mind, Murray is no solid, durable guy himself either. He got hurt a lot too. Even though he played all 16 games last year for the first time in his career, he still had a hand injury for the final couple weeks of the season. But if Murray and Matthews go down, who do the Eagles have? Is the question. And Sproles isn't a guy that can carry a load as good as he is.
No, I mean, they have Kenjon Barner, who is an Oregon guy, but given the way that Chip Kelly operates, I could see him going with Darren Sproles, and call me crazy, but it could be Tebow time if they go down. You know, obviously we've seen Tim Tebow. He can carry, and you know you weren't going to get through an Eagles discussion without talking about Tim Tebow. But you
Yeah.
know, if Murray and Matthews go down, that may be an option. You know, getting Tim Tebow in there. Obviously, I'm not a fan of having Tim Tebow here, but if it works, it works. If he wants to go into that role, you know, let Darren Sproles be the Lightning and let Tim Tebow be the Thunder. You know, it's a scenario that I hope doesn't happen, but it could very well happen. Or they could just go with Kenjon Barner and Matthew Tucker, but that's not really going to help anybody. So Chip Kelly's a guy that's going to roll the dice, and he could roll the dice on that with Tim Tebow.
That could be a possibility. So are you saying Tim Tebow, and I can't believe I didn't bring it up being a Broncos fan, but Tim Tebow, do you see him making the 53-man roster?
Oh, man. I didn't at first, but then with this whole, you know, new extra point rule, you know, obviously moving the extra point back, you know, Chip Kelly, he's not going to be kicking a lot of extra points. He's going to be using Tim Tebow. And I think that for that reason, I think Tim Tebow will make the roster. The only thing is do they want to keep 4 quarterbacks? You know, that may be, you know, they're going to have Sam Bradford and Mark Sanchez, and they're going to keep Matt Barkley. They're not going to release Matt Barkley. So then do you want to spend, you know, another roster spot on just keeping Tim Tebow for 2-point conversions? Or do you want to spend that roster spot somewhere else, you know, using that extra offensive lineman, using an extra receiver, an extra, you know, maybe an extra tight end? You know, is he going to be worth carrying a 4th quarterback? You know, I'm not worth it. You know, they just switched G.J. Kinney. He's not going to be a quarterback anymore. He's going to try his luck at wide receiver. We'll see how that goes. I think it's the end of his NFL career. But it's a toss-up for me. I think he will make the roster just because of this new extra point rule.
That has been a speculation of many insiders, and that is something that I would tend to agree with, given that the new extra point rule and the unpredictable mind of Chip Kelly. And we only have 20 minutes, so we're going to move on to the Washington Reds. Forgive me, folks. I have a hard time saying that name right now. I just really do. I think they should eventually change that team name personally, because given how much our country has changed demographically, it's time to change that name. And so the Washington, let's move on to Washington right now, and in their draft class. And let me get the draft class up on the screen for you. And I thought the Redskins had a phenomenal draft, actually. Keep in mind, their new general manager, Scott McCloughan. That was, I believe, the best move the Redskins made all offseason, was bringing in McCloughan to be a general manager. He used to be the general manager with the 49ers, where he drafted guys like Patrick Willis, future Hall of Famer, dare I say. And he also was a scout under John Schneider in Seattle, where he helped build that Super Bowl caliber team. So they have a guy who finally knows what he's doing. They took the GM responsibility away from Bruce Allen, who, in my opinion, is more of a businessman than a football savant. And bringing in Scott McCloughan, I think they made the right moves to set them up very well to build for the future. And in the first round, I was a little shocked at this pick because Leonard Williams, the best player of the draft, was still on the board. But keep in mind, the offensive line did give up 58 sacks last season. So they drafted arguably the best offensive lineman in the draft in Brandon Scherff. And I think Scherff's going to be a solid pro. But the big question with Scherff is that he some people say he projects better at guard than at tackle in the NFL. And the Redskins or Washington believes that he fits better at right tackle right now, to have him as a solid book at opposite Trent Williams, who's one of the best left tackles in the game. But a lot of draftniks were saying that you should treat him like Zach Martin, a similar skill set, move him into guard. So my question is, do you think Scherff is basically better at guard or at tackle in your opinion?
I do think he's going to be a better guard. I think that's where he needs to go. But with Washington, I don't think he can go into guard just because they don't have that right tackle. It's either going to be Tom Compton or Morgan Moses at right tackle, and you don't really want either of them at right tackle. I think Scherf, he can develop, into a right tackle. Maybe use Morgan Moses, who was a third-round pick last year, I believe. Maybe use him at right tackle. But I think to help Washington out the most, he's going to have to be at right tackle. I do think he could be an all-pro guard. Maybe not his first year, obviously, but I do think he could develop into an all-pro guard. But they're better off suited having Spencer Long or their, I believe, fourth-round pick, Eric Quandijo, at right guard than they would be with Tom Compton at right tackle. But I do think Scherf will be a better guard, but he's going to have to play right tackle.
Given what you said and what else they have on the roster, he's like their best option for that position. And in the second round, this was my favorite pick of the Redskins draft. They picked Preston Smith, edge rusher out of Mississippi State. And Preston Smith is versatile. He can line up anywhere, whether it's at right outside linebacker, left outside linebacker, even rushing from like the middle linebacker position, or even nose tackle he can play a little bit of. He is supremely versatile. And keep in mind, folks, the Redskins have Ryan Kerrigan, who is quietly growing into one of the best pass rushers in the National Football League. He had 13 sacks last year. And yes, they like Trent Murphy a lot, but Murphy, I think, is more of a run stuffer than a pass rusher. And Preston Smith, in my opinion, can do it all. And my question is, I am salivating over the potential of this tandem. Do you think that within the next 2 to 3 years or so, we'll be talking about Ryan Kerrigan and Preston Smith as one of the top 10, if not higher, pass rushing tandems in the National Football League?
No, I would definitely say top 10. I would argue top 5. Preston Smith is going to be at that right outside position. They're not going to keep him behind Kerrigan. They're not going to move him inside. Trent Murphy, like you said, he's more suited to go inside. And so Smith is going to be on the outside. And, him and Kerrigan causes nightmares on his own. And actually, cool story about Ryan Kerrigan, I actually go to college with his sister.
Whoa.
She plays volleyball. Yeah, so actually it's an interesting story about Ryan Kerrigan. I've never actually met him, which is unfortunate. But, Preston Smith, getting back to Smith, him and Kerrigan are going to cause a nightmare for offenses. As you mentioned, Kerrigan's slowly becoming a top player. He wasn't voted into the NFL top 100 players, but at First Stop Fantasy.
He was.
What was his rank in the NFL top?
Like in the 80s or 70s.
80s, 70s? Okay. We at First Stop Fantasy had him ranked as well in the top 100, and he honestly should have been ranked last year in the top 100. He's a great young talent, and I think him and Preston Smith are going to be a really great pass rushing duo to go along with their impressive front three that they have as well. So they're going to be tremendous pass rushers, and they will end up being a top 10 pass rushing duo. They may end up being a top 10 pass rushing duo this year. We'll see. There's tremendous potential there with Preston Smith.
Wouldn't surprise me given that beef they have in the front three and their 3-4 alignment, as you mentioned, and we'll get to that very quickly. But moving right along. Unfortunately, in our nation's capital, the straw that still stirs the drink for that football team is Robert Griffin III. And after his he had an otherworldly rookie season in 2012. Talk about going from riches to rags. Robert Griffin III. Yes, they did pick up his fifth-year option, which will count for $16 million if they bring him back after this year. But if he doesn't show any more growth this year, if he stinks up the joint badly again, like he has these past couple of years, do you think that Washington will be looking to draft his replacement in the 2016 draft next April?
I definitely do think that, if he doesn't pan out, he's going to be gone. Because you look at that 2016 draft class, there's going to be a lot of, high-quality quarterbacks, most notably Christian Hackenberg out of Penn State and Connor Cook from Michigan State. They're going to be top guys there. And, if Robert Griffin III, this is do or die for him. This year's going to be do or die, Obviously, they don't have much behind him with Colt McCoy and Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins showed flashes of being good, but it's not much there behind him. And, Jay Gruden still believes in Robert Griffin. I don't anymore. At this point, I think he's done. One more injury, and it may not be the end of his NFL career, but it very well could be. And obviously he was a great college quarterback, but a lot of college quarterbacks like him don't make it. Obviously, we saw Vince Young, Troy Smith, who was one of the best college quarterbacks ever, didn't do anything in the NFL. But players like Robert Griffin III, he can't stay healthy, and he gets injured by his own doing. He's running out there, he's running in the field, and he's arms up, running around like he's crazy, not holding on to the ball, and he's getting hit. Whether he's getting hit in his leg, getting hit up top on the shoulder, just everywhere. And they're going to draft a replacement next year. They're going to have to admit defeat. They gave up so much to get him. They're just going to have to admit defeat and, draft a replacement.
Yes, exactly. And that, I believe, could go down to be one of the worst trades ever made in National Football League history. And
Yes.
And I think that's the reason why Bruce Allen was robbed of the GM duties, and they gave it to Scott McCloughan. And and I also agree. RG3, we've seen the best of him. He was an athletic freak, but his mechanics were too poor to ever be a solid NFL quarterback. And I'll say it again, folks, the NFL game is meant to be played from the pocket. I just like preaching that truth on my show, but if you think I get too annoying with that truth, you could give me a nudge. But back to Scott McCloughan. Scott McCloughan is set, like I said, he's setting the Redskins out of Washington in a positive direction by like changing their practices, changing their business model. He did it. Spend a lot of money in free agency. He wants to build through the draft, but he did spend a little in free agency this year, but I believe he got major steals. He got Stephen Paye, who was like one of the lone bright spots for that Bears defense the last 2 years. He'll slide in at the 5 technique. And at nose tackle, he got Terrence Pot Roast Knighton. I don't know. Not only don't know why the Denver Broncos let him go, I don't know why another team picked him up for more money. Yeah. He's one of the best run-stuffing bodies ever. They think he's too fat. He's always fat in the spring. He always trims down in time for training camp. Folks, come on. Terrence Knighton, 1 year, $4 million with a weight clause out of all things in that contract. And you also got, obviously, Kerrigan and Preston Smith that we talked about, and you got some promising inside linebackers there in Perry Riley. And also you made adjustments to the secondary by bringing in Chris Culliver, who McCloughan helped recruit to San Francisco via the draft, I believe, and Jerron Johnson, who McCloughan knows from his days with the Seahawks, who was a backup safety, to correct a defense that has been absolutely horrendous, even worse than the Eagles these past several seasons. So I believe that this defense can surprise as well this year. How much do you think Washington's defense will improve after all those additions?
Okay. Get ready for this. Another top 10 defense in the NFC East.
Whoa!
Another top 10 defense. Their secondary isn't as great. Obviously, the secondary isn't as great compared to Philadelphia. But I like it's crazy, but I do like the Redskins' front seven. I like it a lot. Obviously, getting Stephen Paye, Terrence Pot Roast Knight, and you have Jason Hatcher up there in the front, like that's insane. Having those front three, I mean, they're veterans. Obviously, Terrence Pot Roast Knight, and like you said, a $4 million steal, an absolute steal. And that Ryan Kerrigan, Preston Smith, Perry Riley, who I think is very underrated. to go along with that secondary, they could be a top 10 defense. And I do think the Washington Redskins will finish second in the NFC East. I won't tell you who's going to be first and third, but the Washington Redskins will finish second. That also depends on Robert Griffin. I think with Robert Griffin, they get that second slot easily. But with Colt McCoy, I think with that defense, they could finish second in the NFC East. Obviously, that's a lot. Like I said with Philadelphia, a lot can change from now until week 1, because you don't know what's going to happen in training camp. You don't know what's going to happen in preseason, which is why I don't tend to make this many bold predictions as of yet. But on paper, this is a top 10 defense. A lower top 10, I would say probably 9th or 10th, whereas I would have Philadelphia up there around 6 or 7. But the AFC East and the NFC East have arguably the best defenses in the NFL. That obviously goes with the downfall of the 49ers defense, which we could talk for 3 hours on the downfall of the 49ers. But, I really think that the Redskins are going to surprise a lot this year. Whether it's Robert Griffin III or it's Colt McCoy or it's Kirk Cousins back there, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. They have Alfred Morris, who's as reliable as they get out there. So they're gonna surprise a lot of people, I think.
Regardless of who's a quarterback, you think Washington has the chance to be a playoff team, regardless of who's under center?
I think regardless, I'm a big believer in, if you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to be good, which is why I think, the Buffalo Bills, despite how great their defense is, I don't think they have a shot of being a legit Super Bowl contender. But you look at their quarterbacks, you got just terrible names there, E.J. Manuel and just everybody else there. But Robert Griffin III, we've seen him perform. Obviously, we saw him perform in his rookie year. He could be so fantastic at times. And obviously he has Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson and Jordan Reed, Niles Paul to kind of help him out there on the offense. But I think, with Colt McCoy or Kirk Cousins or Robert Griffin, they can succeed and finish second in the NFC East, which will be 2 spots ahead of the New York Giants, who will finish dead last. And then coming in third will be the Dallas Cowboys, and the Philadelphia Eagles will win the NFC East.
Oh, man, you have made a lot of bold predictions tonight, man, and that's what I admire about you. You're never afraid to think outside the box in anything can happen league like the NFL. And you just answered basically my last question. You gave me your prediction for the final standings of the NFC East this season. And Andrew, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate it. And to those who watched or who are going to watch on YouTube afterwards, we apologize for the technical difficulties that occurred at the top of the broadcast, but I will mention exactly where they fall within the time limits so you can fast forward over them, because we got a lot of great things, great discussions this evening. And I, once again, would like to thank you so much for lending your amazing football knowledge to the program, Andrew. And I definitely hope this isn't the last time you do it. But before we sign off, I want to give you the chance to tell our viewers where they can read your work and discuss some football with you.
All right. Well, first of all, everybody log on to first.fantasy.com. That's where a lot of my work will be published. I write for I will generally cover the Miami Dolphins, but I'll also be writing some fantasy articles there. And also follow me on Twitter. You can go to David's profile and find me. It's at _Weidmanator. That's WEIDMANATOR. You can find me on Twitter. I'm on there. I'm going to be talking sports all the time on Twitter. That's mainly where you're going to find me, but obviously go check out First.Fantasy. It is a great site to go to for football knowledge, but that's going to be where you find the majority of my work. I'll also be posting links to a sports blog that I'm going to start, or that I have started. I'm going to get back on that. I'll be posting that on Twitter, so that's where you're going to find me. So please find me. I love talking. Start talking to me on Twitter. Anything you want to ask me, I'll answer.
Please check it out indeed, folks. FirstStopFantasy.com is an amazing site. I wrote for it before, and Andrew is still there. And it is and for the quickest fantasy advice you can get, check out FirstStopFantasy.com and follow Mr. Weidman, Andrew Weidman. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name earlier in the broadcast as well. Please follow him. He brings up a lot of amazing football points as well. And as like you saw tonight, folks, he likes to think outside the box. And that is what I love about him. So thank you once again, Andrew, for coming on the show. And I definitely hope we have you on to discuss more football throughout the season.
Of course. Of course, it was a great honor to be here. And, I love talking football. So anytime I get some free time, I'm going to be hopping on the show. So it was fantastic.
It sure was, Andrew. And once again, folks, that does it for tonight. But we'll be back on the air on Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, where I bring in Denver Broncos insider Eric Trickle from MileHighHuddle.com to discuss the Demaryius Thomas contract and what it means for the team's finances going forward, and their position battles and roster battles in training camp. And that does it tonight for Sports Krunch with Dkrom. For Andrew Weidman, I'm your host, David Cromwell, a.k.a. Dkrom. Good night, everybody.